She was not supposed to be there. The royal summons arrived with the king's seal official. Undeniable, impossible to refuse. But the moment Poppy stepped into Blackthorn Palace, she knew something was wrong. No one had been expecting her, especially not the Alpha King himself. Cold, silent, a ruler who had not smiled in years. They said he buried his heart with his Luna, that grief had turned him to stone, that the palace had become a tomb where even laughter feared to enter. But then she fell, spectacularly, dramatically, in front of the entire royal court. And the king, who had forgotten how to feel, laughed. Now the documents that brought her cannot be explained. The servants whisper. The council watches. And the Alpha King keeps finding reasons for her to stay. Why would a clumsy Omega disrupt 5 years of carefully maintained numbness? What was it about her chaos that cracked something everyone believed was permanently broken? And who forged a king's seal to bring her into his world? As winter tightens its grip on the kingdom, Poppy begins to understand. Some arrivals are not mistakes. Some falls are exactly where you were meant to land, even when they shatter everything. Snow fell over Blackthorn Kingdom like ash from a funeral pyre. The execution grounds stood silent except for the rhythmic crunch of boots against frozen earth. 3 wolves knelt in the center of the courtyard, their hands bound behind them with silver-laced rope that burned through skin and pride alike. Traitors, thieves, fools who thought they could steal from the crown and live to brag about it. Alpha King Nicholas Hampton stood on the elevated platform, his massive frame draped in black fur that made him look like death itself had taken solid form. His eyes, once described as stormy gray, now just empty, surveyed the condemned without a flicker of emotion. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing. The head executioner looked up, waiting for the signal. Nicholas raised one hand. The blade fell 3 times. 3 lives ended. The crowd remained frozen in place, barely breathing. They had learned years ago that any reaction, horror, relief, even agreement, might draw the king's attention. And his attention was something no one wanted anymore. Nicholas descended the platform steps with measured precision. Each footfall echoed through the courtyard like a judge's gavel. The wolves parted before him automatically, creating a path wide enough that he would never have to brush against anyone. Touch had become foreign to him. Connection, even more so. Your Majesty, Wesley Chandler appeared at his side, falling into step with the practiced ease of someone who had served as beta for over a decade. His brown hair held traces of early silver, stress carved into every strand. The council is waiting. Nicholas said nothing. He rarely did these days. The palace of Blackthorn rose before them like a monument to grief. Black stone walls climbed toward gray skies, windows like hollow eyes staring out at nothing. Once, music had drifted from those windows. Laughter, life. Eleanor had filled these halls with warmth that even the harshest winter couldn't diminish. Eleanor Hampton, his Luna, dead now for 5 years. Nicholas walked through corridors he no longer truly saw. Servants pressed themselves against walls as he passed, heads bowed, eyes down. He was their king, yes, but he was also their ghost, a reminder that even the strongest wolves could be hollowed out by loss. The throne room doors swung open before he reached them. Inside, the council had already gathered. Eden Maxwell stood near the massive fireplace, her dark eyes sharp and calculating as always. Jeremy Cantrell and Morris Williamson occupied their usual positions at the long table, faces carefully neutral. Nicholas claimed his throne without ceremony. The chair was carved from ancient oak and lined with wolf pelts, a symbol of power that felt increasingly meaningless. Power couldn't bring back the dead. It couldn't fill the crater in his chest where his heart used to beat. "Reports," he said. His voice came out flat, empty of inflection. Morris cleared his throat. "The northern border remains secure. No breaches this month." "Trade routes?" Nicholas asked. "Stable," Jeremy answered, though the eastern pacts are requesting lower tariffs again. Denied. The word landed with finality. There would be no negotiation, no discussion. Nicholas Hampton had become a king of absolutes, yes or no. Live or die, stay or go. The gray areas where Eleanor once guided him had vanished with her. Eden stepped forward, her movements precise. She was the only one who occasionally challenged him, though even she had learned to pick her battles carefully. "There is one other matter, Your Majesty." Nicholas's gaze shifted to her, waiting. "An Omega has been delivered to the palace," Eden continued, her tone carefully measured. "She claims she was summoned. Chosen. For you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Wesley went rigid. Jeremy and Morris exchanged quick glances. Nicholas rose from his throne with predatory slowness. "I issued no such summons." "I am aware," Eden said. "Yet she insists the orders came from the palace. She has documents bearing the royal seal. Fury should have ignited in his chest. Someone had forged his seal, used his authority, brought an Omega to his door, as if he were some common wolf seeking a mate. But fury required energy Nicholas no longer possessed. "Send her away," he said. "There are complications." Eden's hesitation was microscopic, but present. "She claims she has nowhere else to go. The village she came from has already reassigned her quarters, and there is the matter of the documents. If we simply turn her out, questions will arise about the legitimacy of the royal seal." "I don't care about questions." "You should," Wesley spoke up, his voice tight. "The packs are already whispering that you've become isolated, unstable. If word spreads that we're turning away Omegas, who arrive under official summons forged or not, it weakens your position." Nicholas turned his full attention on his beta. Wesley held his ground, but barely. They had been friends once, brothers in all but blood. Now they were king and subject, separated by a chasm of grief that Wesley couldn't cross. "Bring her here," Nicholas said finally. "I will address this personally." Eden nodded once and disappeared through a side door. The remaining council members shifted uncomfortably. They had all learned to dread moments when Nicholas dealt with problems personally. His solutions tended toward the permanent. Minutes passed in suffocating silence. Then the doors opened again, and she walked in. Poppy Bullock. The name would come later, but in that first moment, Nicholas registered only chaos. She wore a thin, traveling dress, completely inadequate for winter, her auburn hair escaping from what had probably started as a neat braid. Her hands clutched a scroll, likely the forged documents, and her green eyes were wide with something between fear and determination. She took 3 steps into the throne room. Her foot caught on absolutely nothing. Her body pitched forward with graceless momentum. The scroll flew from her hands. Her arms windmilled frantically. She crashed into a decorative table that had stood in that exact spot for 3 generations. The table collapsed. She went down with it. Porcelain shattered. Metal clanged. A ceremonial sword that had been displayed on the wall somehow ended up on the floor beside her. Complete destruction achieved in under 5 seconds. The throne room froze. Every wolf present had the same thought: this Omega was dead. The king would call for her immediate removal, or execution, or both. Poppy scrambled to her hands and knees, her face flushed crimson. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean the floor must be slippery. Or maybe my shoes? These aren't my usual shoes. I borrowed them from—" "No, that doesn't matter. I'm sorry." She tried to stand, slipped again, and went down hard on her backside. Nicholas stared at the wreckage, at this tiny Omega who had just demolished 300 years of royal dignity. At the way she kept apologizing even as she failed repeatedly to get back to her feet. Something cracked inside his chest. Not a large crack, not painful, just a shift. And then it happened. Nicholas Hampton, the Alpha King who had not smiled since burying his Luna, who had watched executions without flinching, who had become living stone, laughed. The sound started low in his chest, almost rusty from disuse. It built into something genuine, uncontrolled. His shoulders shook. His head tilted back slightly. The laugh filled the throne room like music from another lifetime. Every wolf in the room went absolutely still. Wesley's mouth fell open. Eden's calculated composure cracked. Jeremy and Morris looked at each other as if confirming they hadn't collectively hallucinated. Poppy finally managed to stand, using the wall for support. She stared at Nicholas with confusion written across her delicate features. Did I do something funny?" "You destroyed a priceless table," Nicholas said, his voice still carrying traces of amusement, "and took down a ceremonial sword without touching it. That is. He paused, searching for the word. Impressive. Impressive isn't usually the word people use, Poppy mumbled. Disaster-prone is more common. Also clumsy. My sister once said I could trip over air. Nicholas studied her more carefully now. She stood barely over 5 feet tall, delicate even for an Omega. Her dress was worn but clean, mended carefully in several places. She held herself with the posture of someone used to making herself small, unobtrusive, forgettable. But he had just laughed at her. After 5 years of feeling nothing, a clumsy Omega had made him laugh. Eden, Nicholas said, not taking his eyes off Poppy. Explain the documents. Eden recovered her composure instantly. They appear legitimate. Royal seal, proper formatting, signed with your seal stamp. Someone with access to your private office created them. Nicholas knew immediately who. He would deal with Wesley and Eden's scheming later. For now, he had a more pressing problem. What is your name? He asked Poppy directly. Poppy Bullock, Your Majesty. She attempted a curtsy and nearly lost her balance again. I'm from Millbrook Village. I received papers saying I had been selected to serve in the palace. I thought maybe there had been a mistake, but the alpha of my village said the documents were legitimate, and I should come immediately. So I did. I packed everything I own, which isn't much, and I came. And you believed these papers? Why would I question the king's orders? Poppy's confusion seemed genuine. I'm nobody, just an Omega who works in the village bakery. If the king summons me, I come. That's how it works. Wesley stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. No. Nicholas's voice cut through the suggestion. She stays. The room collectively held its breath. Your Majesty? Eden ventured. Nicholas moved down from his throne, descending the steps with that same predatory grace. But something had shifted in his movement. The absolute emptiness had cracked, just slightly. He stopped a few feet from Poppy, close enough to catch her scent lavender and something sweeter, like honey bread fresh from an oven. You will remain in the palace, he said, temporarily, until I determine what to do about this situation. Poppy's eyes went even wider. Yes, Your Majesty. Of course, whatever you command. Eden will assign you quarters. You will not wander the palace without supervision. You will not speak of this summons to anyone. Is that understood? Yes, Your Majesty. Nicholas turned back toward his throne, then paused. And Poppy Bullock? Yes? Watch your step. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough that every wolf in the room noticed. As Eden led Poppy from the throne room, Wesley waited until the doors closed before speaking. Nicholas. Not now, Nicholas said quietly. But soon. You and I will have a very thorough conversation about forging royal documents and meddling in matters that are none of your concern. I was trying to help. Were you? Nicholas settled back onto his throne. Or were you trying to force life back into a corpse? Wesley flinched but didn't back down. You're not dead. I was. Nicholas closed his eyes briefly. I was content to be. And now? Nicholas thought about the Omega who had crashed into his throne room like a natural disaster. About the laugh that had torn from his chest without permission. About the crack in the wall he had built around himself. Now, he said slowly, I don't know. But for the first time in 5 years, not knowing didn't feel like drowning. It felt like breathing. Poppy followed Eden Maxwell through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The palace was nothing like the cozy bakery where she had spent most of her life, or the small room above it where she had slept since childhood. Everything here was massive carved stone columns, vaulted ceilings, tapestries depicting battles and coronations from centuries past. And it was cold. Not just temperature cold, though her thin dress did nothing against the winter chill seeping through the walls. This was a deeper cold, the kind that settled into bones and made a place feel abandoned even when people walked its halls. You were fortunate, Eden said without looking back. The king could have had you thrown out immediately, or worse. Poppy hurried to keep up, her borrowed shoes clicking against polished floors. I wasn't lying about the documents. I really did think they were real. Oh, they're real enough. Eden's tone carried an edge. Someone in this palace wanted you here. I have my suspicions about who. They climbed a staircase to the 3rd floor. The servants' quarters, Poppy guessed, based on the narrower hallways and simpler decor. Eden stopped before a wooden door and pushed it open. The room was small but clean. A single bed with plain linens, a dresser with a cracked mirror, a window overlooking the inner courtyard. Compared to what Poppy had left behind, it was practically luxurious. "You'll stay here," Eden said. "Meals are served in the servants' hall 3 times daily. You are not to enter the king's private quarters under any circumstances. The West Wing is strictly forbidden. The council chambers are off-limits unless specifically summoned. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Eden studied her with those sharp, dark eyes. "Why are you really here, Poppy Bullock?" "I told you. I know what you told me. I'm asking what you want. No one comes to this palace without wanting something." Poppy shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want anything except not to be sent away. I have nowhere else to go. My village already gave away my room. My job at the bakery went to someone else. If I leave here, I'll have nothing. Then I suggest you avoid breaking any more priceless furniture." Eden left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. Poppy stood in the center of her new room, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she had been kneading dough and daydreaming about someday having a bakery of her own. Now she was in the palace of the most feared alpha king in the territory, a king who apparently hadn't smiled in years until she face-planted in his throne room. She sat on the edge of the bed, testing its firmness. The mattress was better than her old one. The blanket was thicker. The walls didn't have cracks letting in winter wind. By any practical measure, she had improved her situation. So why did she feel like she had made a terrible mistake? Nicholas stood at the window of his private study, watching snow continue to fall. Behind him, Wesley and Eden waited for the storm they both knew was coming. "Explain," Nicholas said without turning around. Wesley spoke first. "You haven't shifted in 5 years. You haven't attended a single pack gathering. You barely eat, rarely sleep, and you rule through fear rather than respect. We needed to do something. So you forged documents and brought an Omega to my palace?" "We brought life to your palace," Eden corrected. "Someone soft and unthreatening. Someone who might remind you that the world contains more than duty and death." Nicholas finally turned to face them. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes held a dangerous glint. "You had no right." "We had every right," Wesley shot back, his frustration finally breaking through. "We're your beta and your advisor. We're supposed to protect you even from yourself. Eleanor wouldn't have wanted this, Nicholas. She wouldn't have wanted you to become this hollow thing wearing a crown." The mention of Eleanor's name was deliberate, calculated. A strike aimed at the one vulnerable spot Nicholas had left. "Do not," Nicholas said very quietly, "speak of what my Luna would have wanted. Someone needs to. You've turned this palace into a tomb, and yourself into a corpse. We've watched you fade for 5 years, and we're done watching. If bringing one clumsy Omega here is what finally makes you feel anything, then yes, we would do it again." Silence stretched between them like a drawn blade. Nicholas could remove Wesley as beta, could banish Eden from the council, could punish them both for their interference, and ensure no one ever dared manipulate him again. But they weren't wrong. He had become hollow, a ruler without a heart, a king who went through motions because stopping would mean admitting Eleanor was truly gone. And then Poppy Bullock had crashed into his throne room and shattered more than furniture. "She stays until I decide otherwise," Nicholas said finally. But this, he gestured between himself and his advisors, is not forgiven. "You do not make decisions about my personal life. You do not manipulate situations to force outcomes you prefer. Am I understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," they answered in unison. "Get out." They left quickly. Nicholas returned to his window, his thoughts churning. He had laughed today, actually laughed. The sound had felt foreign in his throat, rusty from disuse. But it had also felt good, and that terrified him more than anything had in years. Dinner in the servants' hall was a strange experience for Poppy. Long tables filled with wolves who had perfected the art of efficient eating, consuming their meals quickly and quietly before returning to their duties. No one spoke much, No one lingered. She found an empty spot near the end of one table and received her portion from a stern-faced cook. Bread, stew, and apple. Simple but filling. "You're the new one." Poppy looked up to find 3 she-wolves standing over her. The speaker was tall with blonde hair pulled back severely, Lydia Phillips, based on the name embroidered on her apron. The other 2 were Gabriella Lambert and Kiana McCarthy, both watching Poppy with undisguised curiosity. "Yes," Poppy said carefully. "I'm Poppy. We heard about the throne room," Gabriella said, sliding onto the bench across from her. "Is it true you destroyed a table just by walking?" "I tripped. Into a table that survived 3 wars?" Kiana's tone mixed skepticism with amusement. "I'm clumsy," Poppy admitted. "Always have been. My mother used to say I was born during a lunar eclipse, and it affected my balance." Lydia snorted. "That's superstition." "Maybe, but I still trip a lot." The 3 she-wolves exchanged glances. Something passed between them that Poppy couldn't quite read. Finally, Lydia sat down beside her. "Listen," she said quietly. "I don't know why you're really here or who brought you, but you need to understand something. This palace isn't like normal places. The king isn't like normal alphas." "I gathered that." "No, you don't understand. He's been dead inside since his Luna passed. Most of us who work here have never even heard him laugh. Some of the newer servants didn't know he could. And then you show up and somehow make him laugh on your first day? That's unusual." Poppy set down her spoon. "I didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is that you did. And now every wolf in this palace is going to be watching you very carefully. Some because they're curious, some because they're hopeful, and some because they're suspicious." "Which one are you?" Lydia considered the question. "Cautiously hopeful. The king has been a ghost for 5 years. If you somehow manage to reach him, even for a moment, maybe there's a chance he can come back to us. And if I can't, if today was just a fluke, then you'll be sent away, and things will go back to how they were." Gabriella's voice was matter-of-fact. "The palace will stay cold. The king will stay empty. And we'll all keep serving a ruler who's forgotten how to rule anything except through fear." The weight of their expectations settled over Poppy like a blanket made of lead. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted to be some kind of catalyst for change. She just wanted a safe place to sleep and enough food to eat. But she had laughed at herself after falling, and somehow that simple act of finding humor in her own clumsiness had cracked something in an Alpha King's armor. "I'm just an Omega," Poppy said quietly. "I don't know how to fix broken kings." "Maybe you don't have to fix him," Kiana suggested. "Maybe you just have to be yourself, clumsiness and all." 3 days passed in careful routine. Poppy woke early, attended meals with the other servants, and spent her days doing whatever tasks were assigned to her. Mostly she helped in the kitchens, where her baking skills were actually useful. She made bread that rose perfectly, pastries that flaked just right, cakes that drew appreciative sounds from the usually stoic kitchen staff. She didn't see the king again, but she felt his presence everywhere. In the way servants walked softly through hallways, in the careful way they spoke, always aware that their voices might carry, in the underlying tension that permeated every stone of the palace. On the 4th day, she was carrying a tray of fresh bread to the council chambers when it happened again. Her foot caught on a rug that had probably been placed in that exact spot for decades without incident. The tray tilted. 6 loaves of bread went airborne in 6 different directions. Poppy grabbed for the tray, overcorrected, and crashed into the wall hard enough to rattle the paintings hung there. She slid down to the floor, surrounded by scattered bread. "How?" a familiar deep voice asked from above her. "Do you manage to find every possible way to fall?" Poppy looked up to find Nicholas Hampton standing over her. He wore black as always, his presence filling the corridor despite the width of the space. His gray eyes held something that might have been amusement. "Talent," Poppy said without thinking. "Years of dedicated practice." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Most wolves would be terrified right now," he observed. "I am terrified. I'm just also used to being clumsy. The two can coexist." Nicholas crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. This close, Poppy could see details she had missed during their first encounter. The sharp line of his jaw, the silver threaded through dark hair at his temples, the barely visible scar across his left eyebrow, and his scent pine and steel and something darker, richer. Pure alpha power wrapped in grief. "The bread is ruined," he said. "I can make more." "All 6 loaves? I work in a bakery. I can make 12 loaves in my sleep." Poppy started gathering the scattered bread. "Actually made, past tense. I worked in a bakery, before I came here." Nicholas picked up one of the loaves and examined it. "You made these?" "Yes. They look perfect." They were perfect. Now they're floor bread. Only good for birds. He stood, still holding the loaf. "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Poppy scrambled to her feet, leaving the tray and remaining bread behind. She followed Nicholas through corridors she hadn't explored yet, deeper into the palace. They passed guards who snapped to attention, servants who pressed themselves against walls, council members who stared openly at the unprecedented sight of their king escorting an Omega through the halls. He led her to a set of double doors and pushed them open. Inside was a library that made Poppy's breath catch. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. Comfortable chairs were arranged near windows that let in pale winter light. A fireplace crackled at the far end. "This was Eleanor's favorite room," Nicholas said quietly. Poppy's heart clenched at the vulnerability in those words. "Your Luna. She would spend hours here, reading, writing, planning festivals for the pack. She believed a library was the heart of any civilized place." He set the bread on a small table. "No one has used this room since she died. I keep it maintained, but I don't come here." "Then why bring me here?" Nicholas moved to one of the windows, his back to her. "You asked me a question the day you arrived. You asked if you had done something funny. I remember. The answer is yes. You destroyed centuries of dignity with complete innocence. You fell so dramatically that it was almost performance art. And for 5 seconds, I forgot to be the king who carries the weight of his dead Luna. I just laughed." Poppy waited. She sensed he had more to say. "I don't know why I brought you here," Nicholas continued. "This room is sacred to me. No one enters it. But I wanted you to see it, to understand that this palace hasn't always been a tomb. Once, these halls held music and laughter and hope." He turned to face her. "You made me laugh, Poppy Bullock. For 5 years, I have felt nothing but duty and loss. And then a clumsy Omega crashes into my throne room and cracks something I thought was permanently broken." Poppy's throat felt tight. "I don't know what you want from me. Neither do I. But you're going to stay. Not because of forged documents or political complications. You're going to stay because I'm not ready for you to leave." "Why?" "Because you're chaos," Nicholas said simply. "Innocent, accidental, disastrous chaos. And for some reason, that chaos makes me feel alive." He crossed the room in 3 long strides. Before Poppy could process what was happening, his hand shot out. She thought he was reaching for her, maybe to steady her, though she hadn't fallen this time. But instead, he caught her wrist as her hand brushed against a precariously balanced book on the edge of a shelf. The book teetered. Nicholas caught it with his other hand. He held both book and Omega, his grip firm but careful. "Even standing still," he murmured. "You find ways to disrupt things." Their faces were inches apart. Poppy could feel heat radiating from his body, could see her own reflection in his gray eyes. Her pulse hammered against where his fingers circled her wrist. His thumb rested against her pulse point, and she knew he could feel how fast her heart was racing. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Stop apologizing for existing." He released her wrist slowly, as if reluctant to break contact. The book went back on the shelf. The moment stretched between them awkward, electric, confusing. "Go make more bread," Nicholas said, his voice rougher than before. "The council is waiting." Poppy fled. Not because she was afraid, but because staying in that library with the grieving king who had just admitted she made him feel alive was more overwhelming than anything she had ever experienced. Behind her, Nicholas stood alone in Eleanor's library, staring at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. He had touched her, on purpose, had wanted to touch her, and that terrified him more than 5 years of feeling nothing ever had. The palace began to shift in subtle ways over the following weeks. It started small. Poppy, unable to simply exist without doing something, began rearranging things. Not deliberately, she would never presume to change the palace on purpose, but wherever she went, small improvements followed. In the servants' hall, she organized the spice rack by frequency of use, rather than alphabetical order, making cooking more efficient. In the library where she now spent her free hours, she created a system for marking books that needed repair. In the kitchens, she taught the other bakers a technique for keeping bread fresh longer. And everywhere she went, she fell, tripped over stairs, slipped on polished floors, walked into doors that had been in the exact same position for centuries. The palace guards started a private betting pool about where she would crash next. The kitchen staff began clearing breakables from surfaces before she arrived. But something strange happened alongside the chaos. People started smiling again. Not openly, not obviously. But there were small moments, a suppressed laugh when Poppy tangled herself in curtains, a grin quickly hidden when she somehow ended up wearing flour like a second skin, gentle teasing when she appeared at dinner with her dress on backward. The cold palace wasn't warm yet, but it was less frozen, and Nicholas noticed everything. He watched from shadows as Poppy helped Gabriella carry heavy linens up 3 flights of stairs, refusing to let the she-wolf struggle alone even though Omegas weren't required to do such physical work. He overheard her in the kitchens, humming old folk songs while kneading dough. He observed her in the library, completely absorbed in a book about ancient pack histories, her face lighting up with genuine interest. She was soft where his world was sharp, warm where everything had turned cold, clumsy in a way that somehow felt honest in a palace full of calculated precision, and she was driving him slowly insane. "You're staring again." Nicholas didn't turn to acknowledge Wesley's arrival. They stood in the upper gallery overlooking the Great Hall, where Poppy was currently attempting to hang winter garlands. She had climbed a ladder despite having the balance of a newborn fawn. "She's going to fall," Nicholas said. "Probably. She could get hurt. She usually doesn't. It's like she's made of rubber. Bounces right back up." As if on cue, Poppy overreached for a nail. The ladder wobbled, and she went down in a tangle of limbs and evergreen branches. She landed on a pile of cushions that had been strategically placed by servants who had learned to anticipate her trajectory. "I'm fine," she called out cheerfully, already untangling herself. "The ladder just doesn't like me. We have a complicated relationship." Nicholas felt his mouth twitch. Again. That seemed to happen more often lately. "You're softening," Wesley observed, toward her. "I'm tolerating her presence." You moved her from the servants' quarters to a room in the east wing. The servants' quarters were too loud. She needs quiet to sleep. You assigned her a personal guard. She's a liability. Someone needs to ensure she doesn't break her neck. You had the kitchen prepare honey cakes because you heard her mention she likes them. Nicholas finally turned to glare at his beta. "You're walking a very thin line." Wesley grinned. Actually grinned. Nicholas hadn't seen that expression in years. "I'm walking the line of being absolutely right. You care about her. I find her less annoying than I anticipated. You laugh when she falls. Everyone laughs when she falls. It's impossible not to. But you're the only one who looks worried first." Wesley's expression turned serious. "Nicholas, I know this is complicated." "I know, Eleanor. Don't. Was your Luna and your mate, and you loved her completely. No one is asking you to forget that or diminish what you had. But she's been gone for 5 years. And for 5 years you've been gone too. Poppy makes you present again. That's not betrayal. It's survival." Nicholas looked back down at the Great Hall. Poppy had successfully climbed back onto the ladder and was now attempting to reach the same spot that had defeated her moments before. Her determination was almost admirable. Her coordination remained catastrophic. "She's not Eleanor," Nicholas said quietly. "No, she's not. She's Poppy. Clumsy, sweet, genuine Poppy, who falls down constantly and somehow makes this mausoleum feel like a place where people actually live. You don't have to love her, Nicholas. But maybe you could let yourself like her." Before Nicholas could respond, Poppy's ladder began to tip again. His body moved before his mind caught up. He vaulted over the gallery railing, dropped the 15 feet to the floor below, and caught both Poppy and the ladder before either could crash. He set the ladder upright with one hand, while steadying Poppy with the other. "Thank you," she breathed, her hands gripping his arm for balance. "I don't know what happened. One second I was fine, the next, gravity happened, as it always does around you. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be more careful." "Stop apologizing." Nicholas realized he was still holding her. His hand spanned her waist, his fingers pressing into soft fabric and softer curves beneath. She was small against his frame, delicate, breakable, but she didn't feel fragile. She felt warm and alive and real. He made himself release her. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "leave the garlands to someone with better balance. But I'm almost done." "Poppy." She looked up at him with those green eyes that always seemed too open, too honest. "Yes? Please, for my sanity, step away from the ladder." A smile bloomed across her face, genuine, delighted, unguarded. "You're worried about me. I'm worried about the structural integrity of my palace. You're a walking disaster zone. But you caught me, because I was close by. You jumped from the gallery. That's not close by. That's deliberately coming to my rescue." Nicholas had no good response to that. She was right. He had reacted instantly, without thought, driven by something he refused to name. "The garlands can wait," he said instead, deflecting. "Come with me." He led her out of the great hall, aware of every eye tracking their movement. Let them watch. Let them whisper. He had stopped caring about palace gossip, around the same time he stopped caring about everything else. But now, with Poppy Bullock padding along beside him in her uneven gait, he found himself caring about what people thought. Not for himself, for her, because she was kind and genuine and didn't deserve to be caught up in whatever storm was brewing inside his chest. They walked to the eastern courtyard where winter gardens lay dormant beneath snow. Nicholas stopped at the center, where a stone fountain stood frozen and silent. "Why did you bring me here?" Poppy asked. "Because you need to understand something." Nicholas turned to face her. "This palace has rules. Order. Everything in its place. Everyone knowing their position. You disrupt that order constantly, and normally, I would have sent you away after the first incident. But you didn't." "No, I didn't, because..." He paused, searching for words. "You remind me that chaos isn't always destructive. Sometimes it's just life. Messy and unpredictable and real." Poppy hugged herself against the cold. "I don't mean to be chaos. I know. That's what makes it bearable. You're not trying to manipulate or impress or change anything. You're just existing. Falling down and getting back up and apologizing even when you don't need to. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?" Nicholas studied her. Snowflakes caught in her auburn hair. Her nose was pink from cold. She had a small bruise on her chin from yesterday's collision with a door frame. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'm not ready for you to leave. You said that before, in the library, and I meant it. Stay, Poppy. Fall down as often as you need to. Break whatever you need to break. Just stay." Something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or acceptance. "Okay." Newmark. "Okay? I'll stay, for as long as you want me here." The words hung between them, heavier than she probably intended. Nicholas felt that crack in his chest widen just a fraction. Not painfully, just opening, making room for something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Possibility. That night, Poppy sat in her new room in the East Wing, wrapped in a blanket too expensive for someone of her status. The room was larger than her entire bakery apartment had been. A real bed with soft mattress, windows with actual glass, a small desk where she could write letters to her sister. But despite the comfort, she felt unsettled. Nicholas Hampton was not what she expected. She had arrived prepared for a tyrant cruel, cold, unreachable. And in many ways, he was those things. His reputation wasn't built on lies, but he was also broken in a way that made her chest ache. She saw it in how he held himself, always rigid, always controlled. She heard it in his voice when he mentioned his Luna. She felt it in the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was both solution and problem wrapped into one confusing package. He wanted her to stay. Had asked her directly. A king who reportedly never asked for anything, who commanded and expected obedience, had requested her presence, and she had agreed. Not because she was afraid to say no, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because when Nicholas Hampton had caught her mid-fall today, when his arms had wrapped around her and his strength had kept her safe, she had felt something shift inside herself too. Recognition, maybe, or connection. The understanding that they were both broken pieces, who somehow fit together despite all logic saying they shouldn't. Poppy pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. Not to her sister, not to anyone who would read it, just words for herself, trying to make sense of chaos. Day 23 in Blackthorn Palace. I fell 4 times today. New record. The king caught me once. He said I remind him that chaos can be life instead of destruction. I think he might be lonely. Not alone, the palace is full of people, but lonely in the way that happens when grief builds walls and connection becomes dangerous. I'm not Eleanor Hampton. I could never be her. But maybe I don't need to be. Maybe I just need to be Poppy, clumsy, awkward, genuine Poppy, who falls down and gets back up and makes the cold king laugh despite himself. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. She folded the letter and tucked it under her pillow. Tomorrow she would fall again, probably multiple times. Tomorrow the king would watch from shadows and pretend he wasn't watching. Tomorrow the palace would continue its slow thaw from frozen monument to something resembling life. But tonight, Poppy Bullock let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Winter deepened its grip on Blackthorn Kingdom. Snow fell in thick curtains that turned the palace into an island of black stone, surrounded by white silence. The cold pressed against windows and seeped through walls, making fires burn constantly in every hearth. Poppy had been in the palace for 6 weeks when she noticed the cloak. She was returning to her room after kitchen duty, flour still dusting her sleeves despite her best efforts to clean up, when she passed Nicholas's private chambers. The doors stood open unusual, since the king guarded his privacy with fierce intensity. Inside, she could see him standing at his desk, reading documents by candlelight, and his shoulders were shaking. Not from cold, from exhaustion. Poppy knew she should walk past, mind her own business. Nicholas Hampton was not her responsibility, and his private struggles were none of her concern. But she couldn't make herself move. She watched him pinch the bridge of his nose, a gesture so human and tired that it made her heart clench. The papers on his desk were edged in black mourning notices, she realized. 5 years ago today, Eleanor Hampton had died, the anniversary of her death. Poppy backed away silently. Nicholas never looked up, never knew she had seen him in this moment of vulnerable grief. She returned to her room, her mind churning. What did you give a king who had everything except the one thing he wanted most? How did you offer comfort to someone who had spent years refusing it? The answer came to her as she opened her closet and saw the heavy winter cloak hanging there. It had been provided with her room-thick wool lined with fur, meant for walks in the courtyard. She had never worn it, preferring to stay inside where her clumsiness couldn't send her face first into snowbanks. But it was warm and soft, and maybe that was enough. Poppy wrote a note in her careful, unpracticed script. Grief is heavy. You don't have to carry it alone, but you can carry it wrapped in warmth. She folded the cloak carefully and placed it outside Nicholas's chambers with the note tucked into its folds. Then she returned to her room, crawled into bed, and tried not to think about the king who had looked so broken in his moment alone. Nicholas found the cloak an hour later. He had finally left his desk, his eyes burning from reading Eleanor's letters by flickering candlelight. He did this every year on the anniversary, tortured himself with reminders of everything he had lost. Her handwriting, her words, her plans for a future that never came. The cloak lay outside his door like an offering. He picked it up, felt its weight and warmth, and read the note attached. Grief is heavy. You don't have to carry it alone. He knew the handwriting. Had seen it in the library where Poppy left little notes for herself, reminders to check certain books, questions she wanted to research, random thoughts that made him smile despite himself. She had seen him, had witnessed his moment of weakness, and instead of exploiting it or spreading gossip, she had left him comfort wrapped in wool. Nicholas stood in the empty hallway, holding a cloak that smelled like lavender and honey bread, and felt something inside him crack wider, not break. expand, make room for a feeling he had sworn never to allow again. He brought the cloak into his chambers, draped it over his chair, and tried to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories flooded back with cruel clarity. Eleanor's laugh, her touch, the way she had fit perfectly against his side when they sat together planning kingdom business. The child they had made together a daughter, the midwife had said after. A perfect daughter who never drew breath. He had buried them both, had stood over their graves and felt part of himself die with them. The bond between Alpha and Luna had snapped like a physical cord being severed, leaving him hollow and bleeding from wounds no one could see. For 5 years, he had lived in that hollowness, had ruled his kingdom from inside a cage of grief, had convinced himself that feeling nothing was better than feeling the pain of loss. But Poppy had arrived and reminded him that feeling nothing meant losing everything. The crack widened. Nicholas stood and walked to his window. Snow continued to fall. The kingdom lay silent and sleeping beneath winter's blanket. Somewhere in the East Wing, a clumsy Omega slept in a room he had given her, surrounded by comfort he had provided. And the grief that he had carried alone for 5 years suddenly felt unbearable. He didn't plan to cry, didn't intend to break down. But once the first tear fell, others followed in a flood he couldn't control. Nicholas Hampton, Alpha King, feared ruler, the man who had not shown emotion in 5 years, collapsed to his knees and sobbed. For Eleanor, for their daughter, for the life they should have had, for the man he used to be before loss carved him hollow, for every moment he had spent numb and disconnected, going through motions because stopping meant facing the enormity of what he had lost. He cried until his throat was raw and his chest ached and no more tears would come. He cried alone in his chambers, the only witness to his breakdown, the borrowed cloak that smelled like comfort he didn't deserve. In the East Wing, Poppy woke to silence. But she knew somehow, felt it in her bones, that something had shifted in the palace tonight. That the king who never showed weakness had finally let himself feel. She didn't go to him, didn't offer comfort or intrude on his privacy. Some grief needed to be experienced alone, in the dark, without witnesses or judgment. But she left her door unlocked, just in case he needed to know that someone was awake. Someone was listening. Someone cared if he broke apart in the middle of the night. Morning came cold and gray. Nicholas emerged from his chambers looking like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed and shadowed. He moved through his morning routine, mechanically council meeting, training with the guard, reviewing reports from the northern border. No one mentioned that his voice was rougher than usual. No one commented on the way he held himself, like a man who had been broken and hastily reassembled. They were too afraid of his reaction, too uncertain of what this change meant. But Poppy noticed. She found him in the library that afternoon. He stood by the window where Eleanor used to stand, staring out at snow-covered gardens. "You left me a cloak," he said without turning around. "You looked cold." "I was remembering. Yesterday was 5 years since Eleanor died." Poppy moved closer, but not too close, respecting the distance he might need. "I'm sorry for your loss. Everyone says that, but no one understands what it means to lose your Luna. The bond between Alpha and bonded mate is physical. When she died, part of me died with her. I felt it tear away inside my chest. And I've been walking around with that hole ever since. You loved her very much. She was my everything, my partner, my best friend, the better half of every decision I made. Without her, I'm just this. Empty authority, wearing a crown." Poppy sat down in one of Eleanor's favorite chairs. "You cried last night. I didn't hear you, but I felt it somehow. Like the whole palace took a breath it had been holding." Nicholas finally turned to look at her. "You didn't come to my chambers. You needed to be alone. Most people would have tried to comfort me, or reported my weakness to others. I'm not most people. And grief isn't weakness. It's love that has nowhere to go." The simple wisdom in her words made something shift in Nicholas's expression. He crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite hers, the chair he used to occupy while Eleanor sat where Poppy now sat. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "Do what?" "Feel again. Let someone in. You make me laugh. You make me notice things. You left me warmth when I was drowning in cold. And all of that terrifies me because it feels like betrayal. Of your Luna? Of the grief I owe her. If I start to heal, if I let myself feel happiness or connection or... He paused, searching for words. Or anything that isn't pain. Doesn't that diminish what we had? Poppy leaned forward slightly. Did she love you? More than anything. Then she would want you to live. Really live. Not just exist. Grief honors the dead, yes. But so does living fully in their memory. Staying broken forever doesn't bring them back. It just means they took 2 lives instead of 1. Nicholas closed his eyes. You're very wise for someone who can't walk across a room without falling. Physical coordination and emotional intelligence are completely separate skills. A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. You make me feel things I buried with her. Things I swore I would never feel again. And I don't know if I should thank you or run from you. What do you want to do? He opened his eyes and looked directly at her. I want to let you in, and that terrifies me more than anything I've faced in 5 years. Poppy stood and moved to the window where he had been standing earlier. Below, servants worked in the courtyard, clearing snow from walkways. Life continued despite grief, despite loss, despite the heaviness that tried to pull everything down. When I was little, she said, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. It hurt terribly. For weeks, I couldn't use it properly. And even after it healed, I was afraid to climb again. Afraid of falling. Afraid of being hurt again. Did you climb again? Eventually. Because being afraid of something that brings joy is letting fear win twice. Once when you got hurt, and again, every day, you let that hurt stop you from living. Nicholas joined her at the window. What if I fall? What if I let you in and then lose you too? Then you'll have fallen, and it will hurt. But at least you will have climbed. They stood together in Eleanor's library, separated by 2 feet of space and 5 years of grief. Nicholas felt the crack in his chest widen further, not breaking him apart, making room for possibility. Stay, he said softly. I already said I would. No. I mean, stay close. Don't pull away even when I'm difficult. Even when I retreat back into grief. Stay close enough that I remember how to be human again. Poppy turned to face him fully. I can do that. Why? Why would you take on a broken king who doesn't know how to feel anymore? Because you're not broken. You're grieving. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed, but grief can be carried, and eventually, it can be transformed into something bearable. Nicholas reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. His hand found her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. Thank you, he whispered. For the cloak. For not intruding last night. For existing in your clumsy, chaotic way that somehow makes sense of everything. Poppy's breath caught. His touch was deliberate now, not accidental. His eyes held something new. Not love. Not yet. But the potential for it. The willingness to try. Your Majesty. Nicholas. When we're alone, call me Nicholas. Nicholas, she repeated, testing the name. You don't have to thank me for basic kindness. In this palace, basic kindness has been absent for 5 years. So yes, I do have to thank you. Because you gave me something no one else could. Permission to feel. Permission to break down. And now, permission to heal. He stepped back, dropping his hand. The loss of contact felt immediate and sharp. But the moment had been enough. A shift. An acknowledgement. Something was building between them. Something neither had planned or expected. Something that felt both dangerous and necessary. I should go, Poppy said, though she didn't move. The kitchen needs help with dinner preparation. Of course. And Poppy? Yes? The cloak. I'm keeping it. Not because I need it, but because it smells like you. Lavender and honey bread. And something else I can't name. And that scent, it helps. Poppy fled before she could do something foolish like cry or throw herself into his arms, or confess that his grief made her ache in ways she didn't understand. Behind her, Nicholas stood in Eleanor's library, holding onto the window frame like it could anchor him. He had broken last night, had cried until there were no tears left, and this morning, he had admitted it to the Omega who made him laugh. The walls he had built were crumbling, Soon there would be nothing left to hide behind. No more armor. No more numbness. Just Nicholas Hampton. A man who had loved and lost and was terrified of loving again. But for Poppy Bullock, he might be willing to try. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. After the night Nicholas broke down, something fundamental changed between them. The distance he maintained shortened. The walls he hid behind thinned. He sought her out more often, appearing in the kitchen while she baked, joining her in the library under the pretense of needing a specific book, finding excuses to check on her after she fell. And Poppy found herself looking for him too, watching for his tall frame in corridors, listening for his deep voice in council chambers, noticing details: how he rolled his shoulders when stressed, how his jaw tightened when someone annoyed him, how his eyes softened marginally when he looked at her. The palace noticed. Servants whispered. Council members exchanged meaningful glances. Even Wesley and Eden watched the growing connection with something like satisfaction mixed with concern, because everyone could see what Nicholas and Poppy were both trying to deny. Attraction. It started innocently enough. Nicholas, steadying her after a fall, his hands lingering on her waist a moment too long. Poppy brushing flour off his shoulder after he visited the kitchen, her fingers trailing against fabric and muscle beneath. Accidental touches that happened too frequently to be truly accidental. Then the dreams started. Nicholas would wake in the middle of the night, his body tense and wanting, having dreamed of Poppy in ways that made him feel guilty and hungry in equal measure. Her soft laugh, her gentle hands, her warmth pressed against him in ways that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with desire. He tried to resist, tried to remind himself that she was an innocent Omega, that he was still grieving his Luna, that this attraction was inappropriate and premature and wrong. But his wolf disagreed. His wolf, dormant for 5 years, had woken up, and it wanted Poppy Bullock with an intensity that terrified him. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Poppy was in the library, her favorite place now, reading by the window. Late afternoon sun caught in her hair, turning auburn to copper and gold. She had changed from her usual servant's dress into something slightly nicer. A gift from Lydia. A soft blue that complemented her coloring. She didn't hear Nicholas enter. Didn't notice him stop in the doorway, his breath catching at the sight of her. Sunlight and softness, and complete absorption in whatever she was reading. Beautiful. The thought struck him like a physical blow. Poppy Bullock was beautiful. Not in the dramatic way Eleanor had been, all sharp intelligence and regal bearing, but in a quieter way. Soft edges and gentle curves, and an openness that made his chest ache. She turned a page and smiled at something in the book. The expression transformed her face, made her glow from within. Nicholas made himself move into the room before he did something foolish like stand there staring forever. "What are you reading?" Poppy jumped, the book tumbling from her hands. She lunged to catch it, overbalanced, and pitched forward. Nicholas crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her mid-fall, but this time, he didn't let go. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against his chest. Her hands found his shoulders, gripping fabric and muscle for balance. Her face tilted up, and suddenly they were inches apart, breath mingling, hearts racing. "I've got you," Nicholas said, his voice rougher than intended. "You always do." The words hung between them, layered with meaning. Neither was ready to speak aloud. Poppy's pupils dilated. Nicholas's grip tightened fractionally. The air felt thick, charged with something electric. He should release her. Step back. Maintain appropriate distance. Instead, his hand slid up her back, fingers spreading across her shoulder blade, feeling her warmth through thin fabric, feeling her breathing accelerate. "Nicholas," she whispered. The sound of his name from her lips snapped something inside him. He pulled her closer, eliminating the last inch of space between them. Her soft curves pressed against his harder planes. Her scent flooded his senses, lavender and honey, and beneath it all, something uniquely hers, sweet and warm and perfect. His wolf surged forward, wanting to claim, to mark, to make this Omega his in every way possible. But the human part of him, the part that still grieved Eleanor, hesitated. "I shouldn't want this," he admitted quietly. "Shouldn't want you, but you do." Yes. God help me, yes. Poppy's hand slid from his shoulders to his chest, resting over his heart. She could feel it pounding beneath her palms, rapid, hard, alive. I want this too, she confessed. I know I shouldn't. You're a king. I'm nobody. You loved your Luna. I'm just the clumsy Omega who fell into your life by accident. But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop noticing every detail. Can't stop wanting. What? His voice dropped lower, intimate. What do you want, Poppy? I want you to kiss me. The admission hung in the air between them. Nicholas's eyes darkened. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheek with aching gentleness. If I kiss you, he said slowly, I won't be able to stop at just one. If I start, I'll want more, and more, and more. Then don't stop. He groaned, the sound half surrender, half agony. His other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her face up. His mouth hovered over hers, breath ghosting across her lips. Last chance, he whispered. Tell me to stop. Nicholas. The library door burst open. Edward Bullock, a distant cousin of Poppy's, who served in the palace guard, strode in without knocking. Poppy, I've been looking for you. I need to discuss. He stopped dead, finally registering the scene before him. The king holding an Omega against his chest. The intimate proximity. The obvious interruption. Nicholas didn't move away, didn't release Poppy. Instead, he turned his head slowly to fix Edward with a look that could freeze fire. Get out. The command was absolute. Edward paled, bowed hastily, and fled, but the moment was broken. Nicholas stepped back, putting necessary distance between himself and Poppy. His breathing was ragged, his control visibly fraying. I can't do this, he said, more to himself than to her. Why not? Because you're too innocent, too good. And I'm too broken, too damaged, too full of ghosts to give you what you deserve. Poppy's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. You don't get to decide what I deserve. That's my choice. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. You think you're protecting me by pushing me away, but all you're doing is punishing us both for feeling something real. Yes, you loved Eleanor. Yes, you're still grieving. Yes, this is complicated and messy and terrifying, but pushing me away won't make any of that hurt less. It'll just mean you're alone in your pain again. Poppy, I'm not asking you to forget your Luna. I'm not trying to replace her. I couldn't even if I wanted to. But I'm here, right now, real and present, and willing to take whatever you can give, even if it's just this. Moments of connection, touches that linger, the possibility of something more. Nicholas looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw courage wrapped in softness. She was offering herself knowing he might break her heart. Knowing he came with more baggage than any sane person should accept. Knowing she would always be second to a ghost. And she was doing it anyway. You make me feel things I wasn't supposed to feel again, he said hoarsely. Want things I swore I'd never want. When I hold you, when I smell your scent, when I watch you exist in your chaotic way, I want to claim you, mark you, make you mine in every way possible. Poppy's breath caught. Then why don't you? Because I'm terrified. Terrified of losing you. Terrified of betraying Eleanor's memory. Terrified of feeling this much, after 5 years of feeling nothing. Fear is just love that hasn't found courage yet. More wisdom from the clumsy Omega. More common sense from someone who understands that living means risking hurt. You can't avoid pain by avoiding connection. You just end up alone and miserable instead of alone and numb. Common sense. Nicholas closed the distance between them again. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. The touch was simple but profound, choosing connection over isolation. If we do this, he said quietly, it won't be easy. There will be complications, political ramifications, people who disapprove, and I'll have moments where grief pulls me back into darkness, where I remember Eleanor and struggle with feeling anything for anyone else. I know, I'll hurt you, not intentionally, but I will, because I'm still broken in places and healing takes time. I know that too. Then why would you choose this? Choose me? Poppy squeezed his hand. Because I see you. Not the king, not the legend, not the mask you wear for everyone else. I see Nicholas Hampton, a man who loved deeply and lost tragically, and is trying to figure out how to live again. And that man is worth the complications. Nicholas pulled her close again, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that had nothing to do with catching her fall, and everything to do with holding on to something precious. Stay close, he murmured into her hair. Even when I'm difficult. Especially when I'm difficult. I already promised I would. They stood together in Eleanor's library, holding each other as late afternoon faded toward evening. Outside, snow began to fall again. Inside, two broken people found comfort in shared warmth. But Nicholas knew the real challenge was yet to come. Because want was one thing, acting on that want was another. And he still had to reconcile the man he was becoming with the man he used to be. The man who had loved Eleanor Hampton with everything he had. The man who was starting to fall for Poppy Bullock despite every reason not to. That night, Nicholas couldn't sleep. He paced his chambers like a caged wolf, his mind churning with conflicting desires. His body knew what it wanted Poppy, in his bed, in his arms, in every way possible. But his heart was still tangled in grief and loyalty to a dead Luna. Around midnight, he gave up on sleep entirely. He pulled on a cloak, the one Poppy had given him, because it still carried her scent, and headed for the training grounds. Physical exhaustion might succeed where mental discipline had failed. He found Edward Bullock already there, working through sword forms with vicious intensity. You, Nicholas said coldly, interrupted something important. Edward turned, his expression guarded. I apologize, Your Majesty. I didn't know you were. I didn't expect. That I might feel something for your cousin? That the grieving king might actually be capable of desire? I meant no disrespect. Nicholas moved into the training ring. Draw your sword. Your Majesty, you want to protect Poppy. I understand that impulse. So prove you're worthy of that protective instinct. Defend yourself. Edward raised his sword with the practiced ease of a trained guard. They circled each other, tension crackling in the air. I see how you look at her, Edward said carefully. Everyone does. But she's not Luna Eleanor. She never will be. Nicholas struck first, a testing blow that Edward barely parried. You think I don't know that? I think you're using her to fill a void. And when you've had your fill, you'll discard her. Because that's what powerful men do. They take what they want and leave wreckage behind. Anger flared hot in Nicholas's chest. He attacked with real intent now, driving Edward back with a combination of strength and skill that reminded them both exactly who was king. You know nothing, Nicholas growled, about what I feel or what I intend. Then enlighten me. Edward managed to land a glancing blow. What are your intentions toward my cousin? To protect her, to give her comfort and security, to let her presence remind me that life exists beyond grief. That's not enough. It's all I have right now. Their swords clashed again and again, sparks flying in the darkness. Both men fought with emotions barely controlled, Edward defending family, Nicholas defending his right to feel. Finally, Nicholas disarmed Edward with a move so fast it was almost invisible. The guard's sword clattered to the ground. Nicholas's blade touched his throat with just enough pressure to make a point without drawing blood. Understand this, Nicholas said quietly. I care about Poppy. More than is wise, more than is comfortable. If you think I would hurt her deliberately, you're wrong. But I am also still grieving my Luna. Still figuring out how to exist in a world where she doesn't. That doesn't make me dangerous. It makes me honest. And if you break her heart in the process of figuring yourself out, then I'll deal with that guilt. But I won't push her away just because loving again is terrifying. She deserves better than that. We both do. Nicholas lowered his sword and stepped back. Edward retrieved his weapon, breathing hard. She talks about you, Edward said after a moment. When we do see each other, she says you're kinder than people think. Gentler beneath the armor. She sees good in you that most people don't know exists anymore. Your point? My point is that she's falling for you. Really falling. And when an Omega falls for an Alpha, she falls completely. With everything she has. So whatever you're doing, whatever this is, be sure. Because if you're not, if you're just testing the waters, you'll destroy her. Nicholas met the guard's eyes. I'm not testing anything. I'm falling too, and it terrifies me. But I'm falling anyway. Edward nodded slowly, something like respect entering his expression. Then I'll trust you to catch her, like you always do. Always. They trained together until dawn broke, working through complicated forms that required focus and trust. By the time sun touched the horizon, they had reached an understanding. Not friendship too much still separated them, but mutual respect built on shared concern for the same person. Nicholas returned to his chambers as servants began their morning routines. He bathed, changed, and prepared for another day of ruling his kingdom, but his thoughts stayed fixed on Poppy. On the way she felt in his arms, on her courage in choosing him despite all the valid reasons not to, on the desire that burned hotter every time he touched her. He wanted her, mind and body and soul, and soon, very soon, he would stop fighting that want and claim what they both needed. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. Not complete avoidance, they still saw each other during meals and council meetings and those accidental encounters in corridors. But the charged intimacy from the library had frightened them both. Nicholas retreated into formality. Poppy threw herself into helping with preparations for the winter festival. The distance was necessary and unbearable. On the 4th day, Nicholas found a note slipped under his door. I understand why you're pulling away. Grief makes terrible sense when it's trying to protect what's left of your heart. But I'm still here. Whenever you're ready to climb again. He read it 3 times, memorizing the curves of her handwriting. Then he did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He wrote back, I'm not pulling away because I don't want you. I'm pulling away because I want you too much, and I don't know how to want someone without drowning them in all the broken pieces I'm still carrying. Meet me in the library tonight. After midnight. Come alone. He left the note in her quarters and tried to focus on kingdom business. But his mind kept drifting to midnight, to what he planned to say, to the risk he was about to take. Poppy found the note when she returned from kitchen duty. Her hands shook as she read it. I want you too much. Those 5 words changed everything. She spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation, helping with festival preparations without really seeing what she was doing, making bread that somehow turned out perfect, despite her distraction, falling only twice, a new record that Lydia commented on with raised eyebrows. What's happened? Lydia asked while they folded linens together. What do you mean? You're glowing, and you're not falling every 5 minutes. Something's different. Poppy couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. Nicholas asked me to meet him tonight. Lydia's eyes went wide. The king? Asked you specifically to meet him? Alone? In the library. Oh, honey. That's not a casual meeting. That's a declaration. A declaration of what? Of whatever he's been too scared to say out loud. Lydia gripped her hands. Be careful. I know you care about him, but he's still grieving, still figuring himself out. Don't let hope blind you to reality. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're an Omega falling for an Alpha King who might not be ready to catch you. Poppy thought about all the times Nicholas had literally caught her. Every stumble, every fall, every moment of clumsiness met with his strength and steadiness. He's ready, she said with more confidence than she felt. And so am I. Midnight found Nicholas in the library, pacing before the fireplace. He had changed from his usual formal attire into something simpler, a dark shirt and trousers that made him look less like a king and more like just Nicholas. He had even left his crown in his chambers, setting aside the weight of authority for one night. The door opened. Poppy slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that made her look soft and ethereal in the flickering firelight. They stared at each other across the room. All the words Nicholas had planned vanished from his mind. All he could think was how beautiful she looked, how right she felt here, in this space that had belonged to Eleanor but now somehow belonged to both his past and his possible future. You came, he said unnecessarily. You asked me to. I wasn't sure you would. After I pulled away, you were scared. I understand being scared. Nicholas moved toward her slowly, giving her every opportunity to leave if she wanted. But Poppy didn't move. She stood her ground, her chin lifted with quiet courage. I need to tell you something, Nicholas said when only a few feet separated them. and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" "Yes." He took a breath and began. "5 years ago, I had everything. A Luna who was my perfect match. An unborn child we both wanted desperately. A kingdom at peace. A future that stretched before us bright and full of promise. Then Eleanor went into labor 2 months early. The midwife tried everything, but our daughter was too small. She never breathed, never cried, never lived. And Eleanor, she hemorrhaged. By the time we realized how bad it was, there was nothing anyone could do. She died in my arms, asking me to promise I would keep living, that I wouldn't let grief destroy me. I promised. Then I broke that promise for 5 years. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to continue. I stopped living the day I buried them both. Stopped shifting. Stopped connecting. Stopped feeling anything except duty and emptiness. I convinced myself that numbness was strength. That ruling through fear was enough. That I could exist forever in that frozen state without consequences. Then you crashed into my throne room and fell so dramatically that you made me laugh. And suddenly, the ice started cracking. Poppy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she stayed silent, letting him speak. "You terrify me, Poppy Bullock. You make me feel things I buried with Eleanor. You make me want things I swore I'd never want again. When I hold you, when I smell your scent, when I watch you exist in your clumsy, genuine way, I want to claim you. To make you mine. To give you everything I gave Eleanor and more. But that feels like betrayal. Like I'm replacing her. Like I'm choosing to move on when I should stay loyal to her memory forever." He closed the remaining distance between them, his hands finding her shoulders. "I pulled away because wanting you this much scared me. Because every time I touch you, I forget to feel guilty. Every time you smile at me, I remember what happiness feels like. And that made me feel like I was failing her. Failing our daughter. Failing the man I used to be. Nicholas, let me finish, please." He took another shaky breath. "I talked to Wesley yesterday, told him everything I just told you. And he said something that broke through my guilt. He said Eleanor made me promise to keep living, to not let grief destroy me. And that by staying frozen, by refusing to heal, I was breaking that promise every single day. He was right. Eleanor wouldn't have wanted this. She would have wanted me to find joy again, to love again, to live fully rather than just exist." His hand slid from her shoulders to cup her face, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. "I can't promise you easy. I can't promise I won't have moments where grief pulls me back. I can't promise that loving me won't hurt sometimes. But I can promise you this, I will never lie to you. Never hide what I'm feeling. And I will never, never take you for granted. Because you gave me something no one else could. You gave me permission to live again. Nicholas, I'm not done. I need to say this all at once or I'll lose my courage." His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "I'm falling for you, Poppy. Maybe I've been falling since that first laugh. Maybe it started when you left me the cloak. Maybe it was the moment I caught you in this library and didn't want to let go. I don't know when it started. I just know that it's happening. And I'm done fighting it. I'm done pushing you away because I'm scared. I'm done honoring my dead Luna by staying dead inside. Eleanor would have wanted me to love again, to find happiness, to choose life over grief. So that's what I'm choosing. I'm choosing you." Poppy's tears fell freely now, silent tracks down her cheeks. Nicholas caught each one with his thumbs, his touch achingly gentle. "You don't have to say anything right now," he continued. "You don't have to decide anything. I just needed you to know. Needed you to understand that when I pulled away, it wasn't because I don't care. It was because I care too much, and I'm still learning how to carry that without drowning in guilt." Finally, he stopped talking. The words hung in the air between them, raw, honest, vulnerable. Everything he had been too afraid to say for weeks. Poppy took a shaky breath. "Can I speak now?" "Yes. I've been falling for you too. From the moment you laughed at me for destroying your throne room, I've been drawn to you in ways I don't fully understand. You're everything I shouldn't want, powerful, complicated, grieving. But I want you anyway. I want your broken pieces and your guilt and your fear. I want the moments when you smile and the moments when grief pulls you back. I want all of it. All of you. Nicholas's control, already fraying, snapped completely. His mouth found hers in a kiss that was nothing like the gentle, tentative thing he had imagined. This was hunger. Need. Years of suppressed feeling pouring through broken walls. Poppy gasped against his lips, her hands fisting in his shirt. Nicholas deepened the kiss, tilting her head back to taste her more thoroughly. She was sweet and warm and perfect, her soft curves pressed against his harder planes. Her scent surrounded him. Her gentle sounds of pleasure undid him completely. His hand slid down to her waist, lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around him instinctively, trusting him to hold her. He carried her to the couch where Eleanor used to read, then paused. "Tell me to stop," he said hoarsely, his lips moving to her throat. "Tell me this is too fast. Don't stop." "Poppy," I said, "don't stop. I want this. I want you. I've wanted you for weeks. So unless you're going to tell me you don't want this too." He kissed her again, swallowing the rest of her words. This kiss was slower, deeper, more thorough. His hands explored carefully the curve of her waist, the softness of her thighs, the arch of her back, learning her shape, memorizing what made her gasp, discovering all the ways she fit perfectly against him. Poppy's hands moved too, sliding under his shirt to find warm skin and hard muscle beneath. He groaned at her touch, his control slipping further. His wolf surged forward, demanding more, demanding everything. But the human part of him held on to reason by a thread. "Not here. Not like this. You deserve better than a hurried encounter in a library. I don't care where. I care." He forced himself to pull back slightly, though every instinct screamed at him to continue. "When we do this, and we will do this, I want to take my time, want to savor every moment, want to give you the attention and care you deserve, not rushed because I've lost control. Deliberate, intentional, right." Poppy's breathing was ragged, her lips swollen from his kisses, her eyes dark with want. "That's very noble, also very frustrating. Trust me, I'm frustrated too." He helped her untangle her legs from his waist and set her gently on her feet. "But you're worth waiting for, worth doing this right." She straightened her dress with shaking hands. "When then?" "Soon. I need to prepare some things. Need to make sure everything is perfect for you. Can you wait a little longer? Do I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. If you want this now, if you want me to forget about perfect and just..." "No." Poppy pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "You're right. We should do this right. I can wait. But Nicholas?" "Yes?" "Don't make me wait too long." He kissed her again, softer this time, promising rather than consuming. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and wanting and committed to what came next. "I should go," Poppy said reluctantly. "Before someone notices I'm gone. Let them notice. Let the whole kingdom know I'm courting you." "Courting? That's very old-fashioned." "I'm an old-fashioned wolf. Sue me." He walked her to the door, his hand at the small of her back. "Sleep well, Poppy Bullock." "I doubt I'll sleep at all." "Good. Neither will I." She left with one last glance over her shoulder, a look that promised everything and made his control threaten to snap again. Nicholas stood in the library long after she disappeared, his mind racing. He had done it, had confessed everything, had kissed her with every ounce of suppressed passion he had been carrying, had claimed her in every way except the physical, and tomorrow very soon he would finish what they had started, would make Poppy Bullock his in every sense of the word, would choose life over grief and love over fear. Eleanor would understand. Wherever she was, whatever existed beyond this life, she would understand that he hadn't forgotten her. He had just learned that his heart was big enough to hold both the memory of what he lost and the reality of what he had found. Both Eleanor and Poppy, both grief and joy, both past and future. All of it together, making him whole again. The winter festival arrived 3 days after the library confession. The palace transformed from cold monument to warm celebration. Servants hung garlands and lit candles in every window. Musicians practiced in the great hall. Kitchen staff prepared feasts that would feed the entire court, plus visiting dignitaries from neighboring packs. And through it all, Nicholas and Poppy moved in careful orbit around each other. Close, but not too close. Aware, but not obvious. Building anticipation with every glance, every brief touch, every moment of connection. The court noticed. Of course they noticed. The king, who hadn't smiled in years, now wore expressions that ranged from content to genuinely pleased. The clumsy Omega who had crashed into their lives had somehow become essential. She moved through the palace with new confidence, her falls less frequent, her laughter more common. "You're planning something," Wesley said on the morning of the festival. "I can tell." Nicholas didn't deny it. "Yes." "Does it involve Poppy Bullock?" "Yes." "Is it permanent?" Nicholas turned from the window where he had been watching snow fall over his kingdom. "I'm going to ask her to be my Luna." Wesley's expression cycled through shock, concern, and finally cautious joy. "You're sure? It's only been 2 months since she arrived. I've been sure since she made me laugh, since she left me the cloak, since she looked at my broken pieces and chose to stay anyway. Time is irrelevant when you know." The council will object. Some will say it's too soon after Eleanor. Let them object. This is my choice, my life, my heart. I've spent 5 years dead because I was afraid to live. I'm done being afraid. Nicholas, I know the risks. I know some will see this as betrayal. I know Poppy is nothing like Eleanor she's not supposed to be. Eleanor was my first love, my Luna, my mate. She'll always hold that place in my heart. But my heart is bigger than I thought. It has room for both the memory of what I lost and the reality of what I've found. Room for Eleanor and Poppy. Room for grief and joy. Room for all of it. Wesley gripped his shoulder. She would be proud of you, Eleanor, for choosing to live again, for finding someone who makes you smile. I hope so, because I'm about to turn Poppy Bullock's world upside down. The festival began at sunset. The great hall filled with wolves from across the territory. Alphas and betas and omegas, all gathered to celebrate winter's peak and the promise of spring to come. Music played. Food flowed freely. Laughter and conversation filled spaces that had been silent for too long. Nicholas stood at the head table, fulfilling his duties as king, welcoming guests, making appropriate small talk, maintaining the image of authority and strength. But his eyes kept finding Poppy across the room. She wore a dress Eden had commissioned specially for the festival, deep green that made her eyes brilliant, cut to flatter her soft curves. Her hair was arranged in loose curls that made his fingers itch to touch. She moved through the crowd with Lydia and Gabriella, her smile bright and genuine. Beautiful. Alive. His. Almost his. Soon, Your Majesty. Eden appeared at his side with her usual perfect timing. The court is ready for your address whenever you choose. Nicholas drained his wine and set the glass aside. Then let's not keep them waiting. The musicians fell silent at his gesture. Conversation died as attention turned toward the king. Nicholas descended from the raised platform, moving to the center of the hall where everyone could see him clearly. 5 years ago, he began, his voice carrying easily. I became king in grief. I lost my Luna and our daughter on the same night, and part of me died with them. Since then, I have ruled from duty rather than passion, from strength rather than wisdom. I maintained order through fear, because I had forgotten how to inspire anything else. The hall remained absolutely silent. Poppy stood frozen near the back, her eyes wide. 2 months ago, Nicholas continued, an Omega arrived at this palace by mistake, or perhaps by fate. She crashed into my throne room, destroyed priceless furniture, and made me laugh for the first time in 5 years. In that moment, something shifted. A crack appeared in the ice I had built around my heart, and that Omega Poppy Bullock has been breaking through that ice ever since. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Poppy's face flushed crimson. She didn't try to fix me, Nicholas said. Didn't try to replace what I lost. She simply existed clumsy, genuine, kind. She reminded me that life contains more than grief and duty. That joy is still possible even after loss. That my heart is bigger than I believed. with room for both the memory of what I lost and the reality of what I've found. He moved through the crowd, which parted automatically. Wolves stepped aside until Nicholas stood directly before Poppy. She looked up at him with tears already gathering in her eyes. "Poppy Bullock," he said, his voice softening but still carrying. "You make me laugh. You make me feel. You make me want to be the king this territory deserves, rather than the ghost wearing a crown. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, permission to live again." Nicholas took her hands in his, in front of the entire court, in front of every wolf who had ever feared his cold authority, making a public claim no one could misinterpret. "I know I'm broken in places. I know grief still pulls me back sometimes. I know I come with complications that would make any sensible person run. But you're not sensible. You're brave. And I'm asking you, before all these witnesses, to be even braver. Stay with me. Not as a temporary comfort, not as a distraction from grief, but as my partner, my Luna, my chosen mate." Gasps echoed through the hall. This wasn't just courting. This was a formal declaration, a public claiming. Poppy's tears fell freely now. "Nicholas, I love you," he said simply. "I didn't plan to, didn't expect to, but I do. I love your chaos and your kindness, and the way you find humor in your own clumsiness. I love that you see past my armor to the man underneath. I love that you chose to stay, even when leaving would have been safer. And I'm asking you to keep staying. Forever. Will you be my Luna, Poppy Bullock?" The hall held its collective breath, every eye fixed on the small Omega who had somehow captured their frozen king's heart. Poppy looked around at the assembled court, hundreds of wolves watching, judging, waiting for her response. Then she looked back at Nicholas and smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it. The complications and the grief and the broken pieces. Yes to choosing life together. Yes to being your Luna. Just yes." Nicholas swept her into his arms and kissed her, in front of everyone, without hesitation or restraint, claiming her completely in the most public way possible. The hall erupted. Some cheered. Some looked scandalized. Some wept openly at the sight of their dead king coming back to life. When Nicholas finally pulled back, Poppy was breathless and glowing. "You just asked me to be your Luna in front of everyone." "I know. That's a big decision to announce at a festival." "I know that too. The council is going to have opinions. Let them. You're mine now," publicly claimed. "Everyone here witnessed it. There's no taking it back." He grinned, actually grinned. "Not that I'd want to." Poppy laughed, the sound bright and free. "You're absolutely insane. Probably. But you said yes anyway." "I did. I really did." She touched his face with gentle fingers. "I love you too, by the way, in case that wasn't clear from my sobbing acceptance." It was clear, but I like hearing it anyway. The celebration continued with renewed energy. Music started again. Wine flowed. Wolves danced and laughed, and toasted their king's unexpected happiness. Wesley found Nicholas near midnight and pulled him aside. "That was dramatic, even for you. I wanted everyone to know. No ambiguity, no room for speculation. Poppy is my chosen Luna. End of discussion. The formal bonding ceremony will happen soon. I'm not waiting months for tradition. I've already waited 5 years to feel alive again. We'll have the ceremony at the next full moon. 3 weeks. That's all I'm giving the council to prepare." "Nicholas." 3 weeks, Wesley. Tell them." His beta nodded, recognizing the tone that meant arguing was pointless. 3 weeks it is. Nicholas found Poppy again, dancing with Gabriella and Lydia. She saw him approaching and broke away from her friends immediately. He extended his hand. "Dance with me. I'll step on your feet. I don't care." They moved to the center of the floor. Nicholas pulled her close, ignoring proper dancing distance. His hand splayed across her back. Hers rested over his heart. They swayed together, not quite in time with the music, not quite coordinated, perfect in their imperfection. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly. "Terrified." "Why?" "Because I'm going to be Luna of the most powerful pack in the territory. Because everyone will be watching me constantly. Because I have no idea how to be a queen. Take your pick. Nicholas tilted her chin up. You don't have to be a queen. You just have to be Poppy. That's all I need. That's all any of us need. Someone genuine and kind who reminds us that strength comes in many forms, including falling down and getting back up with grace. I don't have grace. We both know that. You have something better. Heart. And that's worth more than all the grace in the world. They danced until the music slowed to something intimate. Until most of the guests had departed. Until only those closest to them remained Wesley and Eden. Lydia and Gabriella, a handful of council members who had watched the entire evening with varying degrees of approval. Finally, as dawn began touching the horizon, Nicholas led Poppy from the great hall. They walked through corridors now familiar to both of them, past rooms that held memories of grief and loss and slow healing. They stopped at the door to Nicholas's private chambers. I want you to understand something before we go further, Nicholas said seriously. Once we cross this threshold, once I claim you fully, there's no going back. You'll be mine in every sense. Bonded, mated, connected in ways that go beyond physical. Are you ready for that? Poppy reached up and cupped his face. I've been ready since the moment you caught me falling and made me feel safe. Since you confessed your grief and let me see your vulnerability. Since you chose life over fear. I'm ready, Nicholas. For all of it. He opened the door and pulled her inside. The chambers were warm, lit by soft candlelight. A fire crackled in the hearth. Everything had been prepared carefully. Fresh linens, comfortable furniture, an atmosphere of safety and intimacy. Nicholas locked the door behind them, sealing them away from the rest of the world. Then he turned to Poppy with intent written clearly across his features. Last chance to change your mind. Stop giving me chances to run. I'm staying. Good, because I'm done holding back. He kissed her with all the restrained passion from weeks of wanting. His hands found the fastenings of her dress, working them with surprising gentleness. The fabric slipped away, pooling at her feet. She stood before him in thin undergarments, vulnerable and trusting. Beautiful, he murmured. You're so beautiful, Poppy. I'm ordinary. You're extraordinary. And you're mine. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her to his bed, their bed now, laid her down with reverent care, joined her there, his larger frame covering hers with protective weight. What followed was tender and passionate in equal measure. Nicholas took his time, learning every inch of her soft skin, discovering what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her arch into his touch. He worshipped her with hands and mouth and whispered words of devotion. And when they finally joined completely, when he claimed her in the most intimate way possible, it felt like coming home. Like two broken pieces finding their missing halves. Like grief and joy coexisting in the same moment, acknowledging loss while embracing new beginning. Afterward, they lay tangled together in comfortable silence. Nicholas held Poppy against his chest, feeling her heartbeat steady and content against his ribs. I can feel it, he said quietly. The bond forming. It's different from what I had with Eleanor. Softer somehow. But just as strong. Different isn't bad. No, different is perfect. Eleanor was fire brilliant and intense and consuming. Your warmth steady and gentle and healing. I needed fire once. I need warmth now. Both are valid. Both are love. Poppy traced patterns on his chest with gentle fingers. Tell me about her. About Eleanor. I want to know. So he did. Nicholas talked about his first Luna, her sharp wit, her political brilliance, her ability to command a room with just a look. He talked about their courtship, their bonding ceremony, their plans for the future. He talked about the pregnancy and the hope and the devastating loss, and Poppy listened without jealousy or insecurity. She understood that loving someone meant accepting their history, their grief, their scars. That she wasn't competing with a ghost. She was standing beside the memory, making room for both past and present. Thank you, Nicholas said when the story was told, for not asking me to forget her. I would never. She shaped who you are. She gave you the capacity to love deeply. I benefit from that. So why would I resent her? You're wiser than you think. I just have common sense. Love isn't a finite resource. It expands. You can love what you lost and what you found. Both. Always. Nicholas kissed the top of her head. How did I survive 5 years without you? You didn't survive. You existed. There's a difference. But you're surviving now. We both are. They dozed as dawn turned to morning. When they finally rose, the palace was buzzing with news of the king's declaration. Servants whispered. Council members debated. The entire territory would know by nightfall Nicholas Hampton had chosen a new Luna. But in his chambers, wrapped in each other's arms, none of that mattered. What mattered was the connection they had built, the choice they had made, the life they would create together. 3 weeks later, under a full moon that painted the palace silver and white, the bonding ceremony took place. Poppy wore white traditional for a Luna accepting her mate. Nicholas wore ceremonial armor that marked him as Alpha King. They stood before a assembled court and spoke vows that had been spoken for generations. To love, to protect, to honor, to choose each other every day despite whatever challenges came. When the ceremony master pronounced them bonded mates, when Nicholas bit gently into Poppy's neck to mark her as his Luna, the bond snapped into place with tangible force. Connection, understanding, emotion, flowing both ways. Nicholas felt Poppy's love and determination, and slight nervousness. Poppy felt his devotion and protectiveness, and fierce joy. They were bound, mated, connected in ways that went beyond physical or emotional. They were pack now, partners, forever. The celebration lasted 3 days. Wolves came from across the territory to witness their king's new beginning, to see the Omega who had somehow thawed the frozen king, to celebrate the promise of hope and healing. On the 4th day, life in the palace settled into new normal. Nicholas still ruled with strength and authority, but now warmth tempered that strength. Wisdom guided that authority. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, showed mercy where once he showed only justice, and Poppy Luna Poppy now brought gentle chaos wherever she went. She still tripped regularly, still broke things, still needed to be caught, but Nicholas was always there to catch her, just like he always would be. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, Nicholas found Poppy in Eleanor's library. She was reading by the window, one hand absently resting on her slightly rounded stomach. "You're pregnant," he said, not as a question but as awed realization. Poppy looked up with a smile that made his heart expand painfully. "I was going to tell you tonight. Over dinner. I had a whole plan." Nicholas crossed the room and dropped to his knees before her, pressing his face against her stomach, feeling the barely there swell. Sensing the tiny life growing inside a daughter, his wolf told him instantly, "A healthy, strong daughter. Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me everything, for choosing me, for reminding me how to live. You gave me the same things, a home, a purpose, a love I never thought I'd find." She ran her fingers through his hair. "We saved each other, Nicholas." He looked up at her, his Luna, his mate, his anchor to life. "The kingdom will celebrate. An heir. Finally. Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm terrified and thrilled and grateful and overwhelmed. But yes, I'm happy. Deeply, genuinely happy. For the first time in 6 years. Poppy pulled him up and kissed him softly. "Eleanor would be happy too. Knowing you found joy again. Knowing you chose to live. I think you're right. I think wherever she is, she's smiling. Because the man she loved learned to love again. Not replacing her. Expanding. Making room for all of it." They sat together in the library as afternoon faded toward evening. Outside, the kingdom thrived under their combined rule. Inside, 2 people who had been broken by loss found wholeness in each other. The grieving Alpha King who hadn't smiled in years had learned to laugh again. Had learned to love again. Had learned to live again. All because a clumsy Omega had crashed into his throne room and reminded him that even the coldest hearts could thaw. That even the deepest grief could coexist with joy. That life, in all its messy, chaotic, imperfect glory, was always worth choosing. Always. Years later, when their daughter asked how her parents met, Nicholas would tell the story with laughter in his voice. About the day a small omega destroyed centuries of dignity and made him remember what it felt like to feel. About falling down and being caught. About grief and healing and the courage to love again. And Poppy would smile and add the most important part, that sometimes the clumsiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. That chaos and order could coexist perfectly. That love was never about replacing what was lost, but about making room for what could be found. That life was always worth climbing for, even when falling was certain. If this story made you feel something, if you believe that even the coldest hearts can learn to love again, then you're exactly where you belong. Welcome to Ariel Romance Library. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed if you were Poppy? Would you have been brave enough to choose a broken king? Please rate this story from 1 to 10 inches the comments. I love hearing which moment stayed with you most.